This businesswoman and mother of 6 was fatally shot by her own husband, who had sworn to love her till the end, yet decided to bring the death to do them part. The most shocking part is that some Texas police officers had just been alerted, yet the crime was committed as soon as they got there.
Police identified her as 33-year-old Destiney Carey.
Carey was a Killeen business owner and a mother of 6. Understandably, her family is devastated. Her daughter tells 6 News, quote, "My mom was a hard-working woman. She took care of all 6 of us. She was a nurse and she had 2 businesses in Killeen and was getting ready to set up her 3rd location in Dallas. My mom always wanted to be happy," end quote. Her daughter tells us her laugh just lit up the room and that she always wanted to help others. Now, police were responding to a 911 hang-up call on Hobby Road just behind Copperas Cove Park yesterday. When officers arrived, they found her and 37-year-old Kevin Frazier. Both had been shot. Frazier is still in the hospital.
What happened after then is another shocking event that turned the neighborhood into chaos. April 7th, 2022, Copperas Cove, Texas. As soon as tension got so high, 911 was called, but the call disconnected abruptly. Dispatchers hear screaming in the background, so they decided to swing into action. Minutes later, an officer stands at the door of 1002 Hobby Road. He knocks firmly. A man's voice from inside tells him to wait. Something doesn't feel right. More knocking. Then screams from inside the home. The officer kicks the door with everything he has. As it flies open, gunshots explode from within. Inside, he finds Destiney Carey, a 33-year-old mother of 6 and owner of 2 successful businesses, lying motionless near the front door. Her husband, Kevin Frazier, is on the living room floor with gunshot wounds. Despite the officer's immediate efforts to save her, Destiney's life slips away right there on her own doorstep. What happened in those final moments before police arrived? Why would an Army veteran with 11 years of service turn on his successful wife? And most importantly, could this tragedy have been prevented? The story of Destiney Carey isn't just about a crime, it's about how quickly a 911 call can turn deadly, even with police at the door. This is Crazy Dark Files. We have more crazy cases to bring to light. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exposed case. Before her name became linked to tragedy, Destiney Carey was known throughout Killeen and Copperas Cove as a force of nature, a woman who refused to be limited by circumstances or expectations. Born and raised in the Killeen area, Destiney had always possessed a natural drive that set her apart. Friends would later describe her as someone with an infectious laugh and warm personality that drew people in. She was, as many put it, a beacon of light in her community. Destiney's professional journey began in healthcare. She pursued nursing, a career that showcased her compassionate nature and genuine desire to help others. Working as a nurse, she developed a reputation for her caring approach and dedication to patients. This foundation in healthcare gave her valuable skills, attention to detail, crisis management, and the ability to connect with people from all walks of life. But Destiney's ambitions extended beyond a single career path. While continuing her work in nursing, she began exploring her passion for fashion and entrepreneurship. This led to the birth of High Society Boutique, a clothing business that quickly gained popularity among women in Killeen. As the owner and creative force behind High Society, Destiney personally designed clothing that resonated with local women and models. Her eye for fashion and understanding of what made women feel confident helped her boutique stand out in a competitive market. Customers didn't just come for the clothes, they came for Destiney's energy, her style advice, and her ability to make everyone feel special when they walked through her doors. The success of her first venture fueled Destiney's entrepreneurial spirit. By early 2022, she had expanded to own 2 successful businesses in the Killeen area. Not content to rest on these achievements, she was actively working toward opening a 3rd location in Dallas at the time of her death. A move that would have significantly expanded her business footprint beyond Central Texas. What makes Destiney's professional accomplishments even more remarkable is that she achieved them while raising 6 children. Her daughter, Desiree Cannon, would later describe her mother as a hard-working woman who took care of all 6 of them with unwavering dedication. Somehow, Destiney managed to balance the demands of motherhood, her nursing career, and running multiple businesses, a testament to her extraordinary energy and organizational skills. Those who knew Destiney often remarked on her ability to make time for everything that mattered. She attended her children's school events, maintained close friendships, built business relationships, and still found moments to develop new designs for her boutique. Her day likely started before sunrise and extended well into the evening. Yet friends say she rarely complained about the workload. She was always the one encouraging everyone else. One friend shared on social media after her death, "If you were feeling down, Destiney would be the first one to lift you up, even if she was carrying her own burdens." In the Killeen community, Destiney's impact extended beyond her businesses. As a local entrepreneur, she provided employment opportunities and served as a role model for other women with dreams of starting their own ventures. She frequently collaborated with local models and photographers, helping to showcase talent from the area. Her clothing designs were worn proudly by women throughout the community at church services, special events, and everyday occasions. Each piece represented not just fashion, but Destiney's belief that every woman deserved to feel beautiful and confident. When news of her death spread, social media filled with tributes from customers, friends, and community members. Many shared photos of themselves wearing Hysidi designs, each post a testament to how Destiney's creative vision had touched their lives. "She dressed half the women in this town," one customer wrote, "and made each of us feel like we were the most important person in the room." Perhaps what stands out most about Destiney's life was her forward momentum. At 33, she had already accomplished what many don't achieve in twice that time. Yet she was constantly looking ahead, planning her next business move, dreaming of new opportunities for herself and her children. The Dallas expansion represented more than just a new store location. It symbolized Destiney's belief that there were no limits to what she could achieve. Friends say she spoke excitedly about this next chapter, envisioning a future where her brand would reach even more women and provide greater security for her 6 children. It was this bright future, filled with promise, ambition, and love, that made what happened on April 7, 2022, all the more devastating for those who knew and loved Destiney Jasmine Carey. Behind the success story of Destiney Carey lay a relationship that would ultimately lead to her death. Kevin Frazier, 37, was not just any man in Destiney's life. He was her husband and the father of at least some of her 6 children. Frazier had his own impressive background. According to military records, he served in the United States Army for 11 years, from July 2004 to April 2016. During his service, he reached the rank of Staff Sergeant, a position that requires leadership skills, discipline, and the trust of both superiors and subordinates. His military career included 2 deployments and numerous awards, suggesting he was, at least professionally, a capable and dedicated soldier. But what happens when the structure and discipline of military life ends? For some veterans, the transition to civilian life brings challenges, especially in personal relationships, where command structures don't exist and emotions run high. While the full history of Destiney and Kevin's relationship isn't documented in public records, what we do know points to escalating problems, and most of those issues arose from jealousy. Could it be that the husband kept feeling threatened by Destiney's continuous success? The most telling evidence came just one day before the fatal shooting. On Wednesday, April 6, 2022, the Copperas Cove Police Department's daily bulletin recorded an assault with bodily injury family violence report for 1002 Hobby Road, the same address where Destiney would lose her life the very next day. Remarkably, no charges were filed following this report. This represents a critical missed opportunity, a potential intervention point that might have changed the tragic outcome. Why weren't charges filed? Was Destiney reluctant to press charges? Did officers fail to recognize the severity of the situation? These questions remain unanswered, but highlight the challenges in addressing domestic violence before it escalates to homicide. The timing of this report, just hours before the murder, suggests a rapidly deteriorating situation in the household. What might have triggered this escalation? While we can't know the specific dynamics between Destiney and Kevin, the title of jealous husband offers a clue. Destiney's rising success as a businesswoman was changing the power dynamics in their relationship. She was becoming increasingly independent, financially secure, and recognized in the community. Her plans to expand to Dallas would have further cemented her success and potentially increased her independence. For a partner struggling with control issues, a spouse's growing success can trigger deep insecurity. What begins as pride in a partner's achievements can transform into resentment, especially if the other person feels left behind or less successful by comparison. Jealousy in relationships rarely exists in isolation. It typically intertwines with issues of control, insecurity, and sometimes a misplaced sense of ownership over a partner. When combined with access to weapons and a history of violence, it creates a potentially lethal situation. The day before her death, something happened in that house on Hobby Road that prompted someone to call the police and report family violence. The next day, another call, this time a 911 hang-up with screaming in the background. These weren't isolated incidents, but points on a tragic continuum. What makes this case particularly heartbreaking is that warning signs were present. The system had an opportunity to intervene just 24 hours before Destiney's death. The police had been to that address. They had documented family violence. Yet somehow Destiney returned or remained in that home. And Kevin Frazier remained free to escalate from assault to murder in the span of a single day. As we examine what happened on April 7, we must remember that domestic homicides rarely occur without warning. They represent the final, irreversible act in what is often a long pattern of control, intimidation, and violence. A pattern that, in Destiney's case, became evident too late for intervention. April 7, 2022, began as an ordinary Thursday in Copperas Cove, Texas. The weather records show it was a mild spring day with temperatures in the 70s, the kind of day when people might have their windows open, sounds carrying easily through the neighborhood. What happened inside 1002 Hobby Road during the morning hours remains largely unknown. Did Destiney go to work at her boutique? Were the children at school? Was there an argument brewing between Destiney and Kevin? These details haven't been made public. What we do know, with certainty, begins at approximately 12:25 p.m. At that moment, someone inside the residence dialed 911. The call connected briefly before disconnecting, what's known in emergency response as a 911 hang-up. But in those few seconds, dispatchers heard something alarming, screaming in the background. This critical detail immediately elevated the priority of the call. A 911 hang-up alone requires follow-up. Screaming in the background signals potential violence in progress. Copperas Cove police were dispatched immediately. The first responding officer arrived at the residence within minutes. Standing at the front door of 1002 Hobby Road, the officer knocked, following standard procedure. From inside, a male voice, later identified as Kevin Frazier, called out, telling the officer to wait. This response raised immediate red flags. In domestic disturbance calls, a delay request often indicates someone inside is trying to hide evidence, compose themselves, or worse, complete an act of violence. The officer, sensing something was wrong, continued knocking more insistently. Then came the sound that confirmed the officer's worst fears, screaming from inside the home. In that critical moment, the officer made a split-second decision that would forever alter the course of events. Rather than waiting for backup or continuing to request entry, the officer took immediate action, kicking the door with enough force to break it open. As the door gave way, multiple gunshots rang out from inside the residence. The officer was entering an active shooting scene, among the most dangerous situations in law enforcement. According to the arrest affidavit, as the officer made entry, one of the bullets fired inside the home passed through a window attached to the front entrance. That bullet tore through the officer's left pants leg, and a shard of glass embedded in the officer's leg, adding attempted assault on a public servant to the charges Frazier would eventually face. Despite being fired upon, the officer entered the residence and was confronted with a horrific scene. Destiney Carey lay on the floor near the front door, unresponsive and gravely wounded. In the living room, Kevin Frazier was also on the floor with gunshot wounds to his torso area. The officer's training kicked in. First, he secured the scene by placing Frazier in handcuffs, ensuring no further threat existed. Then he immediately began performing life-saving measures on Destiney, continuing these efforts until paramedics arrived. Despite the officer's quick response and attempts to save her, Destiney's injuries were too severe. Justice of the Peace Bill Price would soon arrive to pronounce her dead at the scene. Meanwhile, Frazier, though wounded, was alive. Emergency medical services transported him to Carl R. Darnall Army Medical Center at Fort Hood for treatment of his injuries. The timeline of these events is striking in its brevity, from the 911 call at approximately 12:25 p.m. to Destiney being pronounced dead at the scene likely spanned less than 30 minutes. In that short window, a life ended. 6 children lost their mother, a community lost a vibrant entrepreneur, and a responding officer narrowly escaped serious injury or death. What makes this case particularly haunting is the proximity of help to harm. The officer was literally at the door when the fatal shots were fired. Seconds earlier, and perhaps Destiney might have been saved. A different decision at any point, waiting for backup, not kicking in the door, hesitating upon hearing gunshots, might have resulted in a different outcome, for better or worse. What would you have done if you were that responding officer? When you hear screaming behind a door and someone telling you to wait, do you break down the door immediately or call for backup first? When shots ring out, do you enter or retreat? These split-second decisions define the thin line between life and death, both for victims and officers themselves. Share your thoughts below on what you would have done in this officer's position. As police secured the crime scene at 1002 Hobby Road, the investigation into what exactly happened between Destiney Carey and Kevin Frazier began immediately. Crime scene technicians documented the position of bodies, collected shell casings, and photographed blood spatter patterns that would later become crucial evidence. Justice of the Peace Bill Price arrived to officially pronounce Destiney dead at the scene and order an autopsy, a standard procedure in any suspicious death. Her body was transported to the medical examiner's office, where forensic pathologists would document every wound and injury, creating a scientific record of her final moments. Meanwhile, Kevin Frazier was fighting for his life at Carl R. Darnall Army Medical Center. Despite suffering multiple gunshot wounds to his torso, he survived his injuries. This survival would prove significant, as it allowed investigators to hear directly from him about the events that transpired. An officer was dispatched to Darnall to interview Frazier while he received medical treatment. This initial interview, conducted while Frazier was still in the hospital, would be the first of several. 2 days later, on Saturday, April 9, after being released from the hospital, Frazier was brought to the Copperas Cove Police Department for a more formal interview. It was during these interviews that investigators noticed troubling inconsistencies in Frazier's account. According to the arrest affidavit, Kevin's description of events from the scene of the incident, the hospital, and the subsequent interview at the police department were not consistent. This pattern of changing stories immediately raised red flags for investigators. Even more damning, the affidavit states, Kevin's description of the shooting was also inconsistent with the evidence obtained of Destiney's injuries as described by the medical examiner. This crucial detail suggests that the physical evidence, the trajectory of bullets, the number of wounds, their location on Destiney's body, contradicted whatever version of events Frazier was providing to police. While the exact nature of these inconsistencies hasn't been made public, such contradictions often indicate attempts to minimize culpability or construct a self-defense narrative that doesn't align with physical evidence. The medical examiner's findings provided objective, scientific evidence that couldn't be explained away by Frazier's changing story. By Monday, April 11th, just 4 days after the shooting, the Copperas Cove Police Department had gathered enough evidence to file formal charges. Kevin Frazier was charged with murder in connection with Destiney's death. Additionally, he faced a charge of assault against a public servant, stemming from the bullet that passed through the window and the officer's pants leg during the initial response. The severity of these charges was reflected in the bond amount set by the court. Frazier's bond was set at $1 million for the murder charge and an additional $750,000 for the assault against a public servant charge, totaling $1,750,000, an amount that ensured he would remain in custody as the case proceeded. Frazier was booked into the Coryell County Jail, where records confirmed he remained as of the morning of April 11. The jail roster officially listed him as an inmate, marking the beginning of what would likely be a lengthy legal process. The investigation didn't end with these charges. Detectives continued gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, and building their case against Frazier. They likely spoke with neighbors who might have heard arguments or previous disturbances. They would have reviewed the domestic violence report from the day before the murder, looking for patterns and escalation. They may have examined phone records, text messages, and social media accounts for evidence of motive or premeditation. For the 6 children who lost their mother, for Destiney's extended family, and for a community still reeling from the shock of her death, these investigative details provided little comfort. But they did offer something essential, the promise that the justice system was working to hold accountable the person responsible for taking Destiney Jasmine Carey's life, even if that person was the father of her children and a decorated military veteran. News of Destiney Carey's death spread quickly through Killeen and Copperas Cove, sending shockwaves through communities where she was known not just as a face but as a force, a businesswoman, a mother, a friend. The violent nature of her death, coupled with her prominence as a local entrepreneur, made the loss particularly difficult for many to process. For Destiney's 6 children, the impact was immeasurable. In an instant, they lost not only their mother but also effectively their father, now behind bars charged with her murder. Destiney, Destiney's daughter, spoke briefly to local media, describing her mother as a hard-working woman who took care of all 6 of them. The children now faced the unimaginable task of growing up without the mother who had been their foundation, while simultaneously grappling with how the person who should have protected her had allegedly taken her life. Extended family members quickly rallied around the children, working to provide stability amid chaos. Privacy was maintained regarding their specific arrangements, protecting them from additional public scrutiny during an already traumatic time. The business community in Killeen felt Destiney's absence immediately. High City Boutique had been more than just a store. It was a gathering place where women came not only to shop, but to connect. Regular customers arrived at the boutique in the days following her death, some unaware of what had happened, others coming specifically to pay respects. Many left flowers, cards, and mementos outside the storefront. Social media became the primary outlet for collective grief. Destiney's personal and business pages filled with tributes, memories, and expressions of disbelief. Customers posted photos of themselves wearing her designs, each image a testament to how her creative vision had touched their lives. "She dressed half the women in this town," one customer wrote, "and made each of us feel beautiful doing it." Another posted, "I came to her as a customer and left as a friend. That was just who Destiney was." The community organized a balloon release for April 13, 2022, less than a week after her death. Hundreds gathered, many wearing items from her boutique, to release purple balloons, the color often associated with domestic violence awareness. The event served as both memorial and silent protest against the violence that had taken her life. Local business owners, particularly women entrepreneurs, spoke about Destiney's influence on their own journeys. Several mentioned how she had offered advice, encouragement, or simply served as proof that a Black woman from Killeen could build successful businesses through determination and vision. "She showed us what was possible," one local business owner shared on social media. "She never acted like there was a ceiling on what she could achieve." Perhaps most poignantly, models who had worn Destiney's designs in local fashion shows and photo shoots shared behind-the-scenes images, Destiney adjusting a hemline, fixing a collar, or laughing with her team. These candid moments captured the hands-on entrepreneur in her element, doing what she loved. As the community mourned, many also expressed anger and frustration that warning signs, including the domestic violence report the day before her death, hadn't prevented the tragedy. Domestic violence advocates use the case to highlight the critical period after a report is filed, when victims are often at highest risk. Through their grief, those who knew Destiney worked to ensure that her legacy would be defined not by how she died, but by how she lived, with purpose, passion, and an unwavering belief in her own potential. Destiney Carey's story isn't just a tragedy to be recounted, it's a stark reminder of how domestic violence can escalate from threats to homicide in a matter of hours. Her case highlights critical gaps in our response systems and offers important lessons that could save lives. The most glaring red flag in this case was the domestic violence report filed at the same address just 1 day before the murder. This wasn't merely a coincidence, it was a clear warning sign that violence was escalating in that household. Why wasn't more done after that initial report? While we don't know all the details, we do know that no charges were filed. This represents a critical missed opportunity for intervention, one that might have saved Destiney's life. Destiney's case also highlights the critical importance of immediate police response to domestic disturbance calls. The responding officer's decision to kick down the door when he heard screaming likely prevented additional violence, even though he arrived too late to save Destiney. Every second counts in these situations, and this case demonstrates why domestic disturbance calls should always be treated as high-priority emergencies. For communities looking to better protect victims, several approaches have proven effective. First, implementing lethality assessment protocols during domestic violence calls can help identify high-risk situations. These structured assessments ask specific questions about the abuser's behavior, access to weapons, and history of violence to determine the level of danger. Second, strengthening the connection between police response and victim services ensures that survivors receive immediate support, safety planning, and resources, not just a report filing. Destiney's case also reminds us of the particular dangers faced by women achieving success and independence. Her growing business empire may have threatened the control dynamics in her relationship. Economic empowerment programs must include safety planning for women whose increasing independence might trigger escalated violence from controlling partners. If this story impacted you, please hit the like button and subscribe to help spread awareness about domestic violence. These aren't just statistics, they're real people with dreams, ambitions, and families who love them. What state or country are you watching from? Share in the comments if you've seen communities successfully address domestic violence, or if you have ideas about how we can better protect people like Destiney before it's too late. In the quiet moments after the sirens fade and the news cycles move on, what remains of Destiney Jasmine Carey is far more than the tragic circumstances of her death. Her legacy lives on in the 6 children she raised with unwavering dedication, in the businesses she built from the ground up, and in the countless women who walk taller wearing her designs. Destiney's story is one of extraordinary potential cut short. At just 33, she had already achieved what many spend a lifetime pursuing: successful businesses, a growing reputation, and plans for expansion. She had overcome obstacles, balanced motherhood with entrepreneurship, and created opportunities not just for herself but for her community. The boutique that bore her creative vision didn't just sell clothes, it sold confidence, style, and the belief that local talent deserved recognition. The cruel irony of Destiney's death is that it came at a moment when her future seemed brightest. With 2 established businesses and a 3rd location planned for Dallas, she was on the verge of taking her brand beyond Central Texas. We can only imagine what she might have accomplished with more time. The designs never created, the women never inspired, the business milestones never reached. For the justice system, Destiney's case represents both failure and function. Failure in the missed opportunity to intervene after the domestic violence report the day before her death, but function in the swift investigation and charges that followed. For her community, her death serves as both heartbreak and call to action. The tragedy of April 7, 2022, forever changed countless lives. 6 children left without their mother, extended family members thrust into new roles, friends and customers left with a void that can't be filled. Even the responding officer who kicked down that door and faced gunfire carries the weight of that day. In remembering Destiney Carey, we should focus not on her final moments but on the thousands of moments before. The laughter she shared, the dreams she pursued, the barriers she broke, and the light she brought to her corner of the world. That is the true measure of a life, even one that ends too soon.